We're broadcasting. All right, here we go. Welcome. Digital Roundtable is on. It is Wednesday, May 12th, 2021. It is another gorgeous day in paradise. Temperature in Austin, Texas is a whopping 70 degrees. A little cloudy. It's been raining quite a bit. The lakes are up. It is almost boating season. We are excited about today. We have a superstar on the house. And here we go. Johnny, good morning. Where are you with our music?
Good morning. We're just continuing the conversation. Whiskey River, take my mind. Don't let a memory torture me. Whiskey River, take my mind. You're all I got, take care of me. How you doing?
Excellent. Excellent, John. That's a new tune. I really like that. So
yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Reminds me of much of my life.
John, how are you today?
I'm doing fine. It's a great cool day in the great city of Austin, Texas. As we look outside, we have had some weather, but for the most part, we're having September and October now, so it's a nice day. Again, when I look at what's going on in the world around us, the legislature here is in Texas, and there's lots of talks about the grid. There's lots of talk about what happened, during the snowstorm when God Almighty decided to make the great state of Texas all snowflakes. So it's been interesting kinds of things, different kinds of discussions. Andreas, this is the first time that we have had how we get electricity at the very, very forefront of the legislature.
True, very true. Llewelyn, good morning, sir. How are you?
Well, good day to you, sir. I'm very well indeed. We're a bit progressive up here in New England, and it's already afternoon.
You mean East Texas?
Well, here in East Texas, it's already afternoon.
Because
then we tend to be a bit out front, a bit ahead of you chaps in Austin.
As I tell the folks that get to hear the miracle of Austin in Texas, we just exported one of our greatest assets to the Northwest. So we have Cris Eugster with us today, who's sitting actually in Issaquah. How are you, Cris?
Good, Andreas. I miss you there in Texas. I think the temperature is almost the same. I think we're in the 70s over here as well. So
absolutely. So one of the interesting things that NAES has done by hiring Cris is little that they know that they have brought a East Texas educated Aggie, because he went to MIT, and now he's conquering and bringing the Texas flavor to the Northwest. I'm telling you, we are little by little turning, what is it, John? America, Texas great?
We're going to make America, Texas great. That's the Butler saying.
So let me introduce Dr. Cris Eugster, who is a good old friend of ours. He is currently and recently the president and chief executive officer of NAES Corporation. NAES is an independent service company dedicated to optimizing the performance of energy facilities across the power generation landscape. So we're on for a great talk in the next 60 minutes about generation. He is in charge of more than 4,000 team members who apply deep experience in the operations, maintenance, construction, engineering, and technical support to build, operate, and maintain both traditional and renewable resources, ultimately generating more than 50 gigawatts of energy annually. They're one of the largest players in the US as a standalone independent power producer. Cris in particular has over 25 years of leadership experience in the energy and technology sectors, and he has received his PhD and master's degrees in electrical engineering from MIT, again in East Texas. And he received his bachelor's in electrical engineering from Texas A&M. Whoop. Prior to NAES, Cris was the CEO at CPS Energy, responsible for the operations of CPS power generation, electric delivery businesses that encompass over 7,500 megawatts of generation capacity, 12,600 miles of electrical distribution and 1,500 miles of electrical transmission, serving the San Antonio region, nearly of 2 million residents. Cris, welcome. I hope that I did justice to your bio. We are excited that you are here, and hopefully we'll be able to go deep into everything that you're planning on doing with NAES and in the future.
Well, Andreas, great to be here, and thank you for the invitation to be part of the conversation. I hope you don't make me play a guitar or sing. I want to stay away from that, but otherwise, I look forward to the conversation.
Excellent, excellent. Well, let me start our journey here on the show real quick, just by talking some of the highlights. We track, for those of you who are listening for the first time, every week what's changing. We focus a bit on COVID, and so COVID, it's things hopefully are settling down. We have vaccinated quite a bit of people, and still there's death cases, not too many, but still one is too many, and clearly a lot of tragedy for a lot of folks. But the cases continue to grow, and we are fairly close to the 300 million mark in administered vaccinations, and it's roughly the 16 to 20 million per week. So hopefully by June, everybody that wanted to get vaccinated should have been. And so one of the key questions, Cris, that we ask our guests first and foremost is, probably more on, as you have recently left CPS Energy, but perhaps also in your first few weeks in NAES, what is the impact, any of the lessons learned that you see from COVID to the industry at large? Anything that has changed that COVID has forced the industry to learn to do differently?
Well, a couple of things, and this is both at NAES as well as at CPS Energy. The criticality of our essential workers in terms of keeping those power plants, power generation resources operating is critically important. And so as we went through this pandemic environment, really understanding how to protect our workforce, I think was a key learning. And down at CPS, we did everything from thinking about sites that folks could live at during the height of the pandemic near the plants so that they could be available to those plants, to having relief crews that could step into a plant if needed. So there were very both strategic and tactical things that we learned that we could do even through something as horrific as this pandemic has been. I think the other thing we learned is that we are able to work remotely. We are able to get the job done. With a lot of the other functions that support, those control room or those power plant core operations, we're able to do that. We're able to accomplish that in a more remote environment. And so, I do think you kind of lose some of the connection. You can only do so many Zoom calls and WebExes. You do need that connection, and I'm hoping we're going to get back here sooner than later. But I do think a hybrid model where folks are going to be able to be productive, remotely, but at the same time have that sort of connection that we all need, is going to be the future here moving forward.
Yeah, maybe some kind of new normal. John, real quick, I don't know if you want to add anything to that or follow up with Cris, but I'm curious. The semester is finishing at UT. What is COVID looking like? You're going to have everybody back on campus in the fall. What's going on?
Yes, we do plan to have everybody back on the fall. The college experience will pick up, and we expect that students will be back. We expect to have Memorial Stadium full in the fall, and I've already got my tickets to my alma mater. I'm sorry, Cris, LSU, Baton Rouge, and to fly to UCLA. So we expect everything to be back to normal. Now, the expectation is one thing, the expectation of the reality and what will happen is the other. But certainly we are planning to be in class as we move forward. And just piggybacking on what Cris said, we have been following, Cris, here, the different business models that include, of course, where people work. And so I have sort of switched to two things with my research. I have a big research project on looking at how people are moving from cities to small towns. Texas Monthly had a great article on that, how wealth was moving, and what's the implication for that for different business models. And then that's all the tracking that will go on. That is, when we need a card to say that we have had the virus as we move through things. And the biggest change, however, is not just the movement of the people at home, it's building these small, great offices behind their homes that used to be reserved for some golfing. Now God offer is going to be for an office building so that the people can literally leave home and stay generally there when, at home. This has implications for restaurants around the house. It has implications for the movement of people in terms of buying lunch downtown. So the business models have been very, very interesting to watch. But we're looking forward, Andreas, to I'm looking forward to going to A&M, because I'm real mad about A&M now and what they did to us year before last. And they almost lost to my Tigers this year. So we're looking forward to getting really, really back online.
Llewelyn, what are your thoughts? Any follow-ups or what's going on with COVID? And are you flying back again? Do you see things?
Well, I've started traveling. I've had both my shots rather cautiously down to Washington and once to Florida. And it's very interesting. Washington is still locked down. Here in Rhode Island, it's pretty locked down. Florida wasn't locked down at all. Restaurants full, people in the streets. About 55 to 60% of the people wearing masks, but no sense that anything was unusual except for the proliferation of masks. There's a gradual returning to normal, but we don't know what normal will be. I don't think we'd never go back to the status quo ante, and we're not going to do it now. Some people will never work again in their offices because it suits them not to. But I think there'll be a huge loss if we don't have the human contact, the inadvertent transfer of information between people, the thing you say at the water cooler, across the office, those things. And an awful lot of that is part of how business and everything else functions. If you subtract that, I always say to young reporters, go and see the people, talk to them. Do not send them just an email because you won't get the proliferation of answers that you'll get in person. The best stories for a reporter often come at the end of an interview when you say, is there anything else? This is not exactly a 60 minutes question, but boy, does it produce a lot of news. I would like to ask, if it's appropriate now, to ask Cris some questions about the future of the industry that I'm curious about, one of which, Cris, is...
Let's table that real quick. And I'll come back to you to lead that section.
Okay.
Let me just go back on the economy real quick. So the economy seems to be doing fine. There was a bit of a disappointment on the jobs added in April. The unemployment went up from 6% to 6.1%. There's also a lot of, brouhaha going on about what's going on, that we are, kind of undoing things that we're working fine. And there's a bit of concern in Wall Street and what have you. The tech stocks that were highly inflated are coming down to earth. And a lot of people are not happy with that. John, real quick, what's your sense of what's happening with the economy and what does it look like?
Well, two things. The uncertainty is brought about by the change in the government in Washington. And one thing about when there isn't a change, then the uncertainty is not there. That is, we can generally predict what will happen to the economy. So here in Texas, we talk about as interest rates go up, which we know is bad for business, but great for individuals. And also the tax stuff about, if you sell something and you make over $400,000, then you got to pay like 47% in taxes. Of course, with the house boom here in Austin and Central Texas, in San Antonio, Austin, Waco, and Columbus, and with houses going for, just tremendous amount of money, people paying $300,000 and $400,000 over what the standard price of the home is. So I think that people are concerned about the uncertainty, but on the other hand, people are prepared and doing well with the new kind of business model. As we've said before, the stock market would be stock market. It relates to, of course, the digital money, rather than the everyday business kind of enterprises. And I am still sort of tracking, if you will, what we call the gig economy and what that will look like in the future. The other thing that people talk about is the tremendous amount of money that's being pumped into the economy. What are the long-term ramifications for that when we look at things like interest rates, what people can do? But the biggest thing in Austin, I have written down here, I had a great restaurant to call me in Austin, Hoover's. They cannot find anyone to come to work. All over the city, the gig economy, it is difficult to get people to go back to work. Now, two things can be happening. They can maybe getting out of that gig economy into different kinds of jobs, or it could be the stimulus money that would go through, I think, August. But I tell you this, the biggest thing is, how can I find workers for restaurants and other things in Austin, Texas, and indeed in America? So the economy will bubble along.
Yeah.
We talk about the new business models, and it's very, very interesting. And as a scholar, we just don't have the opportunity to study these kind of changes that a pandemic brings about.
Yeah, no, this is a great point. Cris, real quick, give me some sense on how is the economy looking from your new chair. Obviously, Texas has been growing like crazy. San Antonio is doing fantastic, CPS Energy. But before you do that, and then don't forget to come back to, how's the economy looking and what does 2021, 2022 look like? Just educate us real quick on NAES, sort of some of the key highlights that you want to share about your portfolio. I would imagine that electrification of vehicles plays into the growth of your company. Tell us a little bit about NAES.
Okay, let me switch those two just to build on John's saying. We are definitely seeing a rebound in the economy from last year. I mean, with COVID-19 and what we saw for most of last year, I think it's not unexpected to see a sort of a rebound growth. I think the question is, how does that play with a lot of this, the money that's being injected, to John's point? Where will interest rates go? Are there asset bubbles out there that we need to kind of be aware of? But we're definitely seeing a rebound in the economy here. NAES is really, like you said in the intro, we are the go-to nationwide service provider, operator of power generation resources. So we generate power. That's the part of the value chain that we're in. We operate about 200 plus plants with all sorts of different fuel mix. And we have a growing solar business. So we have 2 gigawatts of solar that we are operating across our operations, and we have 4,000 folks on our team to kind of make all this happen. We are a group of 7 companies that we've acquired over the years in the engineering, construction, operation, maintenance, service provider space. Again, everything from construction services to engineering to fundamental operations businesses that we have. That's what we do. We are a service provider, so we do not own assets. So it actually helps us to be more nimble in terms of where this industry is going and help our customers and our climate on this journey as we move towards a clean energy infrastructure. But at the end of the day, NAES is about people, knowledge, and data. We got a lot of data. We operate a lot of different technologies. We know we see every type of inverter out there in a solar system, so we know which inverters are working in different situations. So there's a lot of optimizations that we can do to help our customers be successful as they, again, move through this journey to more renewables, hydrogen, clean energy infrastructure. And we see big things coming on the horizon. Now, obviously the 2050 net zero goals, but the 2030, if we go to a 50% reduction in emissions by 2030, that is a big step. And how do we help our customers along that journey? I think there's a lot of value to be created here for our society, our industry, and our company.
Llewelyn?
Cris, as we move towards a time of much greater deployment of renewables, when are we going to reach an inflection point that portfolios, generation portfolios, are unbalanced? until such time as we get effective storage. Are we near that point? Is it something that utilities should be worried about? Every one of the renewables that we look at really has some weakness, including for the very oldest hydro. Droughts, but more predictably, solar power and wind. Texas, as you know, has a wind drought most summers. Any thoughts about what that inflection point is and what we can do quickly to improve the backup of new installations of solar and wind?
Yes.
Hydrogen and such are a long way off.
Yes, yes. Well, great question. And my view is storage is coming a lot faster than anyone thinks. Obviously, the players in that industry are very bullish on it, but we are seeing it happen fast. You know, there's a lot of storage that's being deployed in California, ERCOT, in Texas. So storage is coming on in a big, big way. And in my view, solar and storage are going to be together. And so in the future is now. We're going to see more solar and storage projects come together because you have to firm up that intermittent resource. And if you look at some of the price and the technology cost curves that are coming down on storage, it's remarkable how fast that is coming down, those price curves. So we are fully expecting solar and storage to be tightly integrated. Now that helps you for a certain amount of duration, 2 hours, 4 hours, maybe 6 hours, maybe even longer. But with the lithium ion battery, as you know, Llewelyn, the 4-hour duration is kind of a sweet spot. Again, the cost is coming down, so that duration I think is going to continue to get longer, but it's not going to give you days of storage like what you needed in Texas here with the February winter storm. So there is going to be an important role of traditional resources here over the next, X year, 5 years, 10 years, to make sure we firm up that renewables portfolio. So that integrated, diverse generation mix that includes traditional resources, renewables, and storage all have to be working together today. And in my view, they are. So I do think storage is going to be here much sooner than people think.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
John, anything to follow up there?
Yeah, absolutely. We talk a lot about the technology itself. As a consumer, I just want my lights to come on. And I want to ask you this: given all the changes in the nature of how electricity will be delivered, whether micro labs or whatever have you, excuse me, not labs, but micro firms. How do you think about the different business models for your cost structure, and then your cost structure, and as you provide new kinds of opportunities for consumers? Will you have an opportunity to create other kinds of profit centers? Will I be offered other kinds of things other than, let me just turn my light on? Given the emergence of EVs, what are we doing in terms of the consumer? I'm not sure if American consumers or anywhere around the world really understand how electricity works and the delivery of that system works. We certainly know what happens when we order a loaf of bread, if you will, from Amazon. But would there be any kind of training, any kind of advertising for consumers as we go forward in this dynamic electric world?
Yeah, I think, again, the number one thing that the customers want is when they turn on the light switch, the lights come on. So reliable power, I think, is very, very important. Those are the table stakes. That's a must-have. But there's so much more that we can do. And we're seeing generation going from centralized generation resources to a more distributed environment. And so, again, whether it's traditional or renewables or hydrogen or, whatever the technology is, we are seeing more of that happening at the grid, closer to the customer, closer to the meter, maybe even on the other side of the meter. So I think in the future, we're going to see capabilities that may be neighborhood generation resources, community solar, could be behind the meter, it could be a microgrid. But when you have that technology, you've got to be able to take care of it, maintain it, optimize it. It's a lot easier it's not a lot easier, but it's easier if you've got a central plant and you have something that goes wrong, you know where to go, where to fix it. If you've got generation throughout your system with hundreds and thousands and millions of different nodes, really having the intelligence and the operational capabilities to identify where you might have failure, get proactive on it, and make sure you resolve problems before they occur is critically important. And that's kind of what NAES is all about. We are about operations and maintenance and optimization. So our view is our society is building out all this renewable infrastructure, without even and even not just solar, but EVs and other types of technologies and products and services. But someone's going to have to operate and maintain that, and that's kind of where we step in. So as all these solar systems are being built out on commercial rooftops, on libraries, on your residential home, who's going to take care of it when that inverter goes out, or lets that inverter is about to go out in 6 months? You may want to replace it, because once that inverter's out, you're without power from that resource, and you don't want to wait 3 weeks for an inverter to show up at your doorstep, because it takes that much time to get it, through the supply chain. So the aspect of making sure the system is resilient, reliable, and clean, I think is really on the industry to figure out. The consumers want it easy, they want it economical, and they want it sustainable and zero emissions from a climate change perspective.
Yeah. I want to add some points here and get your context as an expert on all this stuff, Cris. We have done quite a bit of research at CMG, and we've been doing, some 80 plus smart grids, smart utilities, smart cities roadmaps on energy and all the changes that need to happen. And so the United States has a total peak capacity of roughly 1,100 gigawatts. That's 1,100 gigawatts. And there are roughly, 173 million buildings that benefit from that grid today. However, as we add transportation and many other things, as we are trying to electrify, in the entire industry sectors, water, transportation, buildings, all of the above, agriculture, so on and so on. But if you take just cars, or there are 400 million registered vehicles in the US, if they all had a 100 kilowatt hour battery, we would need to have, just to charge those cars at the same time, 40,000 gigawatts of standby production capability. Where do you, I see tons of opportunity. Where do you see today the opportunity coming to your company? Is it just adding more central generation resources to existing clients in the sort of utility scale side, or do you see a new shift? Do you see distributed energy resources, the HEBs of the world and others? Are they growing? Is there a new market that is growing between maybe a megawatt and 10 megawatts? It seems like there's an incredible revolution going on. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you see?
Yeah, Andreas, I think you're spot on. There was a great graph, I don't remember the source of it, that we as a society continue to need more and more power. So it's our energy. There are new applications, everything from fixing your retina with a machine, with a laser, takes power that wasn't even there a couple decades ago. So we as a society will need more and more power. So we're in a good business to be in. It's a growth business.
Right.
Now, where that power comes from, I think is that's kind of the central question. And we are definitely seeing a shift from central generation to distributed generation resources. And so we are seeing more and more of that. That technology cost curve is going to keep going down. At some point, you may be in a place where you have one solar panel, because of the cost and the efficiency, may be able to power your entire home. Mm-hmm. And that that's every consumer. You could just have a box there that every consumer can install. Mm-hmm. And you have a storage device there, and you just plug it in, almost like you buy a generator from Home Depot, mm-hmm. except it's renewables, and it has the renewables and it has the storage, and you just plug it in and you got power for your house. Just think about how the whole industry would just flip on that. And we're not that far off. We're certainly within a decade or so of those kind of breakthrough concepts. So that shift is definitely happening. And I don't think people fully understand that this is not necessarily evolutionary. You know, this is not like, okay, I can see all the steps. Sometimes that step may be completely different. And that's where we want to position our company. No matter where the power comes from, we're going to be the go-to operator, the service player to make sure that that is reliable, it works, and it's economical.
Yeah. Any follow-up, guys?
Yeah, Chris, let me follow up on that. We've talked to Andres like to make everything smart. You know, he likes to make us smart. He has all these books, and I read his books, I become smart. Have you thought about the data that would be, quote, kicked off from all of the new technologies, the data science attached to that? Because what we like to say is that maybe the data is a better business model than the actual technology. So as we go through all of the things that will happen that you talked about, that will happen to American homes and American enterprises, do you have any sense of what type of data would be kicked off, and then what utilities can do with that data vis-a-vis commercializing that data? Or do you think that they will continue with the century-old just electricity model and send me a bill?
Yeah, John, that's a great question. I think we're just scratching the surface on the data piece. We as an industry are collecting so much data. I mean, from the smart meters, that's measuring consumption, every few seconds, and that's just one element of it. We see a lot of data from the operations of these very sophisticated machines. We have solar panels, we have inverters, we have storage devices. There's just a ton of data. I don't think we fully realized the value of that data, and how do we really productize that data? And ultimately, we have to be. I'm not a big fan of, because the customer really should own their data. So I'm not a big fan of just marketing data just for data's purposes. It's really about how do we use that data to enhance the customer's experience, to increase the value to them, whether it's reliability, whether it's resiliency, whether it's lowering their cost. That's how we want to use the data. But we're just scratching the surface on that. And, I've got two boys, that are, engineers, freshman engineers, and, data science. I think that is a very bright future for folks that go into that job category.
Llewelyn, any follow-up?
Yeah, I wonder what you advise your customers in your advice role about the future. When you tell them to buy, they have to buy things, and there's so much change going on, so many challenges. You can decide what kind of renewable energy you're going to buy. And there are a lot of other things, including communication systems, the amount of data mining that you're going to rely on, the extent to which your utilities are going to become digital utilities. What do you tell them? Is there a plan forward? Do you recommend a particular business model for 10 years out, for 20 years out, and which technologies will be deployed and which ones will end up going to the wall? These are disruptive times as well as exciting, interesting times.
Yeah, Llewelyn, that's a great question. I don't think there's a single plan. I think how you think about your plan for your individual company or your customer, you really understand what your starting point is and where you're going. But everyone needs to recognize that this train has left. We are moving in this direction, and you have to have a plan, and it needs to be a dynamic plan, because we don't know how disruptive technologies are going to play out. Everyone talks about hydrogen. Hydrogen is a huge topic these days. That could be very disruptive if it plays out in a way, from a cost standpoint and a commercial scalability standpoint. So you have to have a plan, but you also have to be nimble with that plan. I think our advice is really, you need to think about the technology platform that you are serving your customers around. You need to make sure you've got a platform and a knowledge base that allows you to do the things that you need to do in a changing environment. And what are the standards around that platform? What are the people and processes around that platform? I think are really important. and really understanding the future winners and losers in the space, and making sure you're aligned with where the industry is going versus where it's not going. So it's a very good question, Llewelyn. That I don't have a very good answer to that, because we don't know how that future is going to play there. But you do need to have a plan, and it needs to be an agile plan in terms of where you're trying to go.
Do you advise utilities to put in charging for electric vehicles? So far, the market's very small, about 2% of the population of automobiles, but increasing the manufacturers of automobiles are betting that there's going to be a huge surge. Build it and they will come, but it's no good unless there's really a lot of reliable charging. Should utilities be charged with installing charge stations, or will there be a proliferation of private enterprise providing that service?
I think it's a little bit of combination of both. I think the challenge is if you just put charging infrastructure out there without really being thoughtful about how you deploy it, where you deploy it, you can waste a lot of capital. You can also, one of the things we saw is, you put a lot of charging infrastructure out there and the standards change, or, you get better technology and all of a sudden you're swapping it out in 18 months. I mean, that's the other thing about this new energy economy is, we used to think about 40-year life. You make an investment, you get a 40-year life. Now you put a charging station in there, that charging station may be switched out in 18 months because there's faster charging. So really thinking about, what is the operating model on some of these investments, I think is critically important. I personally am more of a sort of a market perspective. Let the market decide kind of where to put this out and how to put it out. We've seen Tesla do that with their nationwide charging stations. So, the market definitely has to be part of that deployment of that technology. But I think utilities play a role there as well.
Let me pause for a second here to do my obligatory commercial. Hopefully you can see my screen. And I want to remind everybody that the Digital 360 Summit is coming August 31st through September 2nd. It's going to be quite an event. We are currently looking for sponsors. Here's the list of companies that I spoke. And Cris has been great enough to keynote for us in the past. And I want to thank Texas State University for sponsoring Digital-Roundtable. So Cris, couple of questions real quick. We seem to see, while there is a shift towards distributed, and there's a lot of energy on the grid edge and all this stuff, I also see a trend where the Department of Interior just gave a contract for offshore wind, 800 megawatts. I mean, it seems like the contracts and the projects are going to get larger and larger. What do you see on that, and what's your sense for that side of the house? It not only on renewables, but perhaps maybe nuclear is coming back. And you used to be the chief executive officer of the oversight committee of SDP, running a nuclear plant. What's your take on that? And because if we need to go from, again, 1,100 gigawatts to 10,000 gigawatts in 10, 15 years, we need a lot of juice.
Yeah, Andreas, I think it's well said. I mean, if we're going to hit some of these goals, 50% emission reduction by 2030, we need a lot. We can't just have one plant. We need multiple resources out there. The DG space obviously is very interesting, but we're also very interested in the utility scale space as well. So we also will service utility scale solar projects, wind projects. So yes, all of the above. We have to have utility scale renewables and storage, and we need DG as well. I do think nuclear has to be part of the equation, part of the discussion. It's a highly regulated business. I know that there's some interesting advancement on that technology around more smaller reactors, but obviously there's a lot of things that have to be thought through before that can be commercialized or deployed. So, but existing nuclear, especially, that's already been built. It's already been funded. And so how do we extend the life of some of those units. I mean, we went for STP from 40 to 60 years. I think EPRI, and I know you had our shot on the show here a couple sessions ago, they are working to extend that life to 80 years. Because again, you've made that investment. There's virtually zero emissions coming off of those kind of resources. And it's got to be part of the equation. So we need all of the different fuel types within the clean energy portfolio to reach some of these very lofty goals.
Absolutely. Any follow-up, guys?
Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Llewelyn, go ahead.
No, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I just want to talk about how rapid this would take. That is, we look at from the Pony Express, if you will, to the telegraph, and then from the typewriter to the computer. Now we're talking about a massive change. And what's interesting, of course, is that the industry that you represent is accustomed to getting technology and kind of sitting on that technology and letting it serve as long as it's serving. And things will change very, very rapidly. As you said, you need to be just in time delivery to some of the new technologies. It doesn't make sense to invest in this rapidly changing technology scene when there's so much changing all of the time. So if you go back to people who put computers together, such as the Michael Dell, for example, they might have a warehouse full of keyboards, and all of a sudden there's a better keyboard. And then they develop a just-in-time delivery. So how would you handle such a massive change in technologies as you gear up to satisfy all of the electric needs for American customers?
Again, that's another tough question. I think Llewelyn also kind of alluded to that. Look, I think we as a society need to decide, are we going to go on this journey? And I think with the new Biden administration, there's clearly a direction and objective here. So I think part of this is, it's going to need the government to kind of step in and provide incentives to people to kind of, put newer technology in place, try different, technologies, because the market, this is not like a piece of software or an iPhone where you're just getting adoption rates up to 100%, within a small number of years. You're talking about big physical assets that, have been around for decades. You're talking about, a grid that's been around since the 1800s. And it's not going to change fast unless unless the society collectively comes together, and part of that is the government regulations, incentives that is going to push this. And I'm more of a free market guy, but if we're going to get to some of these goals, the market's not going to take us. I think it's going to need additional stimulus, infrastructure, incentives, and I think that is going to happen from what I see up in Washington. And you all probably would have your perspective on that as well.
I'd like to ask you, Chris, about two asymmetries. I call them asymmetries. 80% of the power in the country is provided by 60 utilities, but we have over 2,000 utilities. That seems to be an interesting reality. Whether it's an imbalance, I'm asking you. The other asymmetry is we design nuclear power plants that can run possibly for 100 years, very long design life. And we put up windmills, which have a design life of about 20, 25 years. And then in the market, we say, but electricity from wind is cheaper, which is, an imaginary calculation if you take it over any decent length of time. And how do we deal with that? And is there a need to look at our financing differently or our amortization differently? It would seem to me that a nuclear power plant that can, I think South Texas has been licensed for 60 years. If you license for 60 years and you're in year 40 now, even so, the chances are this is going to be cheaper than alternative energy is today, 10 years from now, but we don't know that. How do we calculate these vastly different life expectancies and therefore economic values?
Yeah, another very great question. Look, I think it's a little bit apples to oranges to say, wind or solar is very cheap relative to a nuclear plant or whatever, because it may be cheap for that hour, but it may not show up that next hour. So I don't think it's fair to say, let's just compare this price with this price. You really have to understand, if you firmed up that renewable resource, what would that cost look like? Now, I do think as you bring storage to the mix, you can firm it up. Again, it's not completely apples to apples, because it may only firm up for a certain amount of hours. But when we compare these economic models, Llewelyn, we need to make sure we're comparing apples to apples, because what we saw in Texas, we need to make sure we are talking apples to apples on the requirements, the capabilities of that resource that comes there. I think on nuclear, I think to your point, these units were designed for very, very long lives. The capital has been made. If we can really understand the safety, the regulatory component of it, there's no reason we can't get to an 80-year or even 100-year lifetime. And if we take that off the table, like what we've seen in California, a lot of that is just being backfilled by natural gas plants. And so we really need to be very thoughtful, before we start to kind of shut down any particular fuel source, especially in this journey, because to Andreas's point, we're going to need more and more power, more and more juice. And we need to be very thoughtful in how we migrate our portfolio over those years, over the coming decade. In terms of the question about the asymmetry on the utilities, I think the whole thing is going to change. I think it's a little bit naive to say, the structure we had with these utilities that look like this and these co-ops and units look like this is going to continue to be there for the next 100 years, like they were the past 100 years. Things are going to change, and we are going to see different models. We may different types of utilities that come into the space, but I don't necessarily ascribe a good or a bad to the way things are. I just think things are going to change, and they will change in a better way, because the market will demand it and our customers will demand it, and those that get it right will win, and those that don't will be out of business.
Absolutely. I want to ask you a couple of things as we get into the final 10 minutes. We are on the 5-yard line, about to score our amazing touchdown for today, and there are two things that I want you to share some thoughts in, because you have played some incredible roles in the past. So one is, I want you to share some comments on the recovery of Puerto Rico. You were appointed by the federal government to be chairman of a task force to kind of lead all that and coalesce a significant number of utility players that help restore Puerto Rico. So anything you can share on that, or where is Puerto Rico at, and their shift of architecture and technologies and so on, and any lessons learned. And then also, if you could comment just briefly on, our New England weather in Texas that we got, a challenge with. ERCOT didn't go down. We didn't have a blackout, which is the mission of ERCOT. But the Texas grid is really being impacted by, obviously, climate change, and generation units need to be weatherized accordingly. Anything lessons learned from that you can share as well?
Okay, well, that might take longer than 10 minutes here, Andreas, but let me start with Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, I think is a tremendous opportunity to almost use a blank canvas to kind of, get it right on the renewable sustainability standpoint. It's a remote island, reliability. It's almost like, some of the innovation you've seen in Hawaii, we have the opportunity to do some similar things there in Puerto Rico. I think dollars are starting to flow there in terms of investment in infrastructure. And I know there's some good players out there that are starting to kind of re-architect the grid and how generation is playing out there. But we should be pushing towards this. We shouldn't rebuild the old. We should be pushing forward to, this is the model for the new. And I think some of that is happening, but obviously, there's always more that could be done there. So I do think things are starting to move in the right direction there. But again, tremendous opportunity to really define the blueprint for this new energy economy that we are all talking about. And in terms of what happened in Texas, heart-wrenching, what happened. here in Texas. I think sort of structurally, the state was never set up to deliver on that kind of extreme situation with the weather that happened. It's interesting. ERCOT, I think before that happened, was almost pointed out as a model ISO, because it's all the renewables and the low cost of power, and it's a model. But ERCOT was set up to deliver in real time the lowest cost of power to the market. There's not a lot of backup. It's just for that 15 minutes, it was supply and demand, and whatever resource was lowest cost, it would provide it at that moment in time. But as we saw what happened in February, there was no capacity, there was no additional resources there available to serve the state and the customers that was needed. And so I do think there needs to be a revisit, and hopefully some of this is happening, on how do we continue the great trajectory on renewables, but we really bring resiliency to the table here as part of the discussion. So I hope we don't lose some of the good things on renewables that we were able to accomplish with the Texas grid, but we do add a much more resilient, robust grid that can serve under those extreme weather conditions. Because quite frankly, Andreas, I think we're going to see more of that in the future with climate change. These are kind of, in the old days, they used to be one in a lifetime event, one in a 100-year event. Well, we're seeing hurricanes now hit Texas coast every 2-3 years, 5 years. We're seeing these extreme winter events. So we need to be ready from a grid and a utility standpoint for these kind of situations, because they're going to happen more and more often, and we need to build up a robust, resilient system for that.
Yeah, John, any follow-ups?
Yeah, we've talked about that. We've said that the grid now is where the computers were 50 years ago. And to what extent could we have a smart grid, which of course could be hacked? We have to have all of that in place, so we can do exactly what you said. We can be prepared more for the risk involved as the weather changes. And where we are now, we are connected together with, let's say, mom and pop kind of technology, and mom and pop technology gets on and provides us with the power that we need. So one of the things I think we all need to think about going forward is that in an industry point of view, when you compare the grid to other industries, right, whether it's the computer industry, whether it's the airline industry, the idea of automation, the idea of not somebody just sitting there and doing it by hand, the idea of automation has been lacking in the electronic grid space. So going forward, we really have to think about all the technologies that I think are sitting on the shelf that would allow us to make that move. But we also know that as long as the technology is doing what economically, people are less likely to change it. So I think you're right in looking at and taking the risk out of the future with the increasing number of catastrophes coming. But also I think that the industry has to say, okay, let's take a chance on this technology. Let's make the grid a smart grid all over America, so that we can interact with each other and know where every piece of electricity is at all times.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm wondering, Cris, what are your thoughts of, you're as a service provider, I'm trying to think that, if I need anything, if I'm a utility or if I'm a big CNI customer and I need a one-stop shop to build everything that I would need, I need storage, solar panels, I need to resiliency, I need to upgrade my natural gas, my chillers. Is that the phone call that I make? Are you that company that I call for a one-stop shop?
Absolutely. You just www.naes.com, NAES.com. That's
so basically, if
you.
anybody on the phone is on this video is really interested in sort of solving their any challenge, Ghostbuster problem, just go to naes.com and there it is.
Yeah, Andreas, I couldn't have said it better than you did. We need you as part of our marketing effort. That was very well said.
Absolutely. Let me see if I I think we have a unique situation with our brother from the Northeast here that I've never seen before, and I've tried everything. But real quick, and I know we're coming to an end. John has talked about the business model changes. Do you also, as NAES, do you do consulting on those business models? Do you help your customers figure out how to become that energy as a service provider, or do you do it?
Yeah, we have a consulting group called E3 out of Denver, and they do work with customers on everything from sort of independent engineering on a project to to help them think about the migration to this new energy economy. So we have that resource to help customers. We have products that we can supply customers, and we have, again, people and technology to support them directly.
Right.
Right. One of the things that we talk about a lot with Andreas, and we've discussed this, is that customers, of course, are becoming part of the technology themselves. That is, in other industries, people just don't deliver things to them. They're also smart. They're smart in the sense that they can react in real time. They're smart in the sense that they can make decisions in small time. One of the things that we do know is that private firms, such as, for example, Amazon, might be getting into the electric business. Mm-hmm. If you think about all of the customers that an Amazon would have or Google would have, can you imagine them purchasing the power wholesale and selling it to me retail? So as the customer themselves become smart, how do you look at the change in this business model? I mean, I can't imagine. I think that Google has hired the best grid person in the world. I think that Amazon is looking at this. So the customer, which is accustomed now to interacting with the provider, how do you see this affecting the business model, especially on the retail side?
Yeah, John, I think great question. Back to Andreas's point that, the traditional utility model may look very different, so you have 60 large utilities doing 80% of the bit or whatever the stat was. I think that it's gonna look different. And it doesn't mean that, some of those companies are gonna, maybe acquire capabilities that play them in this space. But yeah, folks like Google and Amazon will be all over this. I mean, energy is probably one of their biggest strategic items that they think about. All the data centers, those are huge energy users. And so I think you're right. I think they're on their strategy whiteboards, they're thinking about, how do they serve the retail customers in their unique way, however they're going to play this. So I do think the industry is going to look very different here over the coming decades than it has over the past few decades.
Absolutely. John, any final follow-up?
Now, I just want to add that all the data, all the medical data, for example, we like to say, okay, let's do a select if on all of the houses that's turning on their light at 1 o'clock in the morning. Maybe there's a health issue there. Let's look at other kind of things, and maybe there's an issue there. So I think the data that's provided, it's a brave new electric world that we're entering in.
Llewelyn, any follow-ups?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had a little computer trouble here, but I'm back with you. Electricity is so challenging. Technology is almost beyond my competence.
Yeah, we saw that you were frozen, so
I was frozen. Well, anyway, we've been in a brave new electric world for more than 100 years. It is the most amazing of all the substances we have piped to the house, because we do so much with it. And one of the other miracles about electricity is really nobody's been able to make a weapon of it yet. Mm-hmm. We have used it for some evil purposes like executions, but by and large, it has just been this massive benefit to humanity. And with that praise for our subject, do I get forgiven for losing the electric supply to my computer?
Cris, I want to say that we are delighted that you have been with us, and thank you. I want to extend my ongoing invitation for you to join us in August 31st to September 2nd, perhaps with some of your colleagues. If you're available, I'll follow up on that on email at another time. Any parting thoughts and remarks? We appreciate you.
No, thank you, Andreas and Llewelyn. Good to see you again, John, as well. Appreciate you having us on the conversation here today, and look forward to round 2 and round 3s. And this is a continuing, dynamic, very interesting topic, and we're glad to be a part of it.
Thank you, Chris. Very interesting indeed. And it's good to see you. And I'm glad the Zoom was working this time.
Thank you. Thank you, Llewelyn.
John, any final thoughts?
That's it. I think everybody have a great time, and we are coming back as Americans, and America will be fully open soon.
All right, take us away with the music.
Okay, let's continue. I'm drowning in a whiskey river, burying my mirrored mind in the wetness of the soul, feeling the amber current flowing from my mind, and warming every heart he left so cold. Whiskey river, take my mind, don't let a memory torture me. Whiskey river, don't run dry, you're all I got, take care of me.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Always a pleasure that you play for us. Chris, thank you very much, sir. We'll see you in the track, as they say. Great to have you. We are off. Let me stop recording.